So they paraded me through my apartment building, took me downstairs, put me in a black car, and they took me to jail. And I ended up spending 2.5 days in jail in 23-hour a day lockdown, in a concrete cell with a metal door. And I truly believed that I was never going to see the outside of a jail cell again.
Welcome to Redacted Conversations. I'm Clayton Morris. On this show, we focus on stories that are kept from you, stories the mainstream media, the deep state, permanent government want hidden from you. One of those stories is what really happened on January 6th, 2021 at the nation's capital. Could just about everything you've been told about January 6th be wrong? Perhaps. Brandon Straka was there that day. He had his life turned upside down after the events of January 6th. He's from Walk Away. He was there that day to give a speech. He's here now to share a story you've probably never heard before on that day. Brandon, welcome back to Redacted.
Thanks for having me.
So you were there that day. You were invited to give a speech there. And I'm just going to give you the floor. I want people to approach this interview, just come with an open mind. We've all seen the television coverage of it. We've seen the theatrics in Washington on Capitol Hill for the hearings and all of that. I want everyone to sort of step back from all of that and walk into this with a clear head and just listen to your story. Can you just set the stage for us and how it came to be that you found yourself at the Capitol on January 6th?
Sure. I really appreciate your setup too, because that's what my experience was like. I think it's very easy for people to sit at home, watch things on TV, especially imagery over and over again of something that, people breaking windows or something that looks really violent. And then after that, start kind of judging and condemning other people who were there without any understanding that the majority of people who were there didn't see any of that and that was not our experience. And so, yeah, I was scheduled to be a speaker at a permitted event that was at the Capitol after President Trump spoke at the Ellipse. And the reason why I was asked to speak is, number one, I'm the founder of something called the Walk Away movement that I started years ago, kind of a political and social movement to encourage people to walk away from the political left, as I did. And through that, I started to gain some notoriety, I guess, in political circles on the right. And after the election in November of 2020, I started doing rallies around the country, encouraging people in swing states like Michigan, New Jersey, Georgia, and then actually I did a few events in Washington, D.C., basically just encouraging people to keep their spirits up, keep their passion alive, because a lot of people felt like there was something amiss about the 2020 election, and a lot of people wanted a forensic audit of the vote to try to understand what legitimately was the outcome of the election. And I really want to set that too, because there's also in my opinion, the left-wing media really took the reins of the January 6th story and just ran with it and ran in a certain direction. And now there are, I think, even people in this country who believe that the purpose of January 6th was for a mob to storm the Capitol and by force install Donald Trump as the president, or remove Joe Biden's presidency. And that was never, ever anyone's position or intention. All anybody wanted on January 6th was for Congress to delay 10 days before certifying the vote, and to throw it back to the states to do a forensic audit so that people could feel 100% certain that the results of the election that we were being told were the final outcome were in fact accurate. And so I got asked to speak on January 6th at this event, and I was always under the understanding that President Trump was going to speak at the Ellipse, that there would be a march from the Ellipse to the Capitol, and that there would be a permitted event on a stage at the Capitol. I didn't exactly know the details, but I wasn't concerned about it because I've done so many rallies and events, especially outdoor events. Outdoor events are very, very, very fluid. They're very different than indoor events. You know, if you do an indoor event and someone says the event starts at 7 and you're speaking at 8, that's usually exactly what happens. If somebody says it's a rally, we're starting around 3 o'clock, you're going to be up at 4:30. It may not start until 5, and you may not get on until 5:30. I mean, that's just what happens. And sometimes, oh, we were supposed to set up the stage over here, but it ended up being over here. Totally normal. So I didn't have specific instructions about where the stage was, but my thought was I'll walk to the Capitol, and when I get there, I'll see the stage, and then I'll
Right.
know where to go.
Right.
So I was on my way to the Capitol after President Trump spoke. I had hired security with me, and I have to listen to them because it's their job, one, to keep me on time, and two, to keep me safe. And I really, really love doing marches. I love being with people. I love that energy. But they said you can't. They said there's way too many people here. You'll never get there, and you'll be super late. You know. So they said you have to take the metro, the DC metro. So we got underground, we got on the metro, we were on our way to the Capitol. And while we were on the metro, I mean, we were very close to the stop. And suddenly I began getting text messages saying from friends and family and colleagues around the country who were watching on television. And they were saying, we're hearing on the news that people are going inside the building. And I thought, that sounds interesting. And the first thought that I had in my mind was the numerous times that left-wing protesters have gone into government buildings during different protests or event like the Brett Kavanaugh hearings or others. There have actually been other situations in our fairly recent history where left-wing protesters have occupied the Capitol building.
Yeah,
have
hallways.
Gone inside,
Yeah, hallways and to occupied whole
sat on the
hallways.
floor,
Exactly.
yeah, done sit-ins, refused to leave. I thought it was something like that. And I also thought that it wasn't very many people because I have gone to so many right-wing rallies. As I said, I mean, it's hard to get conservatives to even show up. It's hard to get conservatives to come out, hold a sign. I mean, conservatives are very much these people that like, oh, I like to spend my weekends with my grandkids or in my garden or, whatever. They don't like to do this stuff. So I'm like, now suddenly they're like going inside the building. I was just like, so I thought that we were talking about maybe 12 people. I thought we were talking about like 10 people went inside or 12 people went inside. And that made sense to me because the news makes a big deal out of everything when it pertains to conservatives or Trump supporters. So if it was 7 or 8 or 10 people who went inside, of course they're going to break into programming for Trump supporters went inside the Capitol. Anyway, so I was kind of several minds about this. I thought either this is nothing, and if it is nothing, then I want to capture it so that I can show everyone the news is lying to you again. This is like nothing is happening. Or it's something. And if it's something, I want to capture that too. So I got off the DC Metro and it was about an 18-minute walk to the Capitol. So I began walking to the Capitol with my security. And when I got about 3 blocks away, I started shooting a video. I wanted to start shooting like plenty in advance because you can always edit a video down and just put the moments out there, but I wanted to make sure if in fact anything interesting is happening, I want to capture it. So I started shooting, I'd say about 3 blocks away from the Capitol. I was approaching from the east side. Now this is another point that I want people to understand. Most people who think that they really have seen what happened on January 6th and they know what happened on January 6th, I can almost guarantee you that you've been looking at either pictures or videos of the west side of the Capitol. The west side of the Capitol, which some people also refer to as the inaugural side of the Capitol or the National Mall facing side of the Capitol. Those are the images and the videos that people have seen of people scaling walls, breaking windows, struggling with police officers, of flashbangs going off and smoke in the air and things like that. That wasn't happening on the east side of the building, the opposite side of the building. So I'm approaching the east side grounds, shooting my video, And as I'm getting there, what I'm noticing is that it's very, very calm. Everything is very calm. And there's people scattered everywhere, all over the lawn. So there's people in groups of 5, 10, 12, standing in circles, smoking cigarettes, talking. In my video, you see a woman casually pushing her baby in a baby stroller. Somebody goes riding by on a bicycle. And I'm just walking along. And as I'm getting closer and closer to the Capitol, I'm on a very, very large sidewalk. I mean, like literally so large that you could drive traffic on it. And at the end of that sidewalk and very close to the Capitol, there's bike rack, which is fully opened and pushed out. So I assume now that at one time that was a barricade, but it was not a barricade when I arrived because the sidewalk was completely open and it was pushed out. And there were literally 0 police officers on the east side. Like, I don't mean 5, I don't mean 10, I mean 0. There was not one police officer on the east side grounds, and the barricades were open. And people were scattered everywhere. And, but as you could see by looking toward the Capitol, that there were thousands of people outside of the east side of the Capitol on the steps and just off of the steps. Now, another point that I would like to make is, so I'm now at this point up to the steps of the Capitol. All of those people that I just mentioned, they're not turned facing the Capitol. They're not trying to get into the Capitol. They're not aggressively charging the Capitol. They're all facing away from the Capitol, holding their signs. There's a woman with a karaoke machine singing a song. People are singing the Star Spangled Banner, chanting, facing away from the Capitol, holding signs. However, in my video, because this is all one long continuous video that I'm taking, at the top of these stairs, there's a man, and he's motioning like this to the people below, and he's shouting, "They've opened the doors. They're letting us in. We're going inside. We're going inside." So I heard him say that. So I walked to the top of the stairs.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Were you able to tell what kind of person this was? Was this a police officer, security, or just a random person? Were you able to see from that far away?
I was only probably 5 feet away, 7 feet away from him, something like that. And I would imagine, I mean, I still believe he was a Trump supporter. Well, I don't believe he was a police officer, and I don't believe he worked for the government or worked in the Capitol. He was dressed like any of the other protesters. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
I mean, who or what he was, I don't know, but he was dressed like a protester. And my impression at the time was that he was a protester who was telling anyone around, "They've opened the doors. Like, we're going in. We're going in." And so I went to the top of the stairs, and when I got to the top of the stairs, again, this is in my video. So everything that I'm telling you right now is verifiable by watching my video. No one has to take my word for anything. When I got to the top of the stairs, sure enough, the doors were open. So we're talking about 2 large metal double doors, both wide open. Now, these are the Columbus doors of the Capitol. Some people may have heard about this, but I'll go ahead and tell your audience right now. So the Columbus doors are 2 20,000-pound metal doors, which are securely locked. It has been stated that you would have an easier time breaking into a bank vault than breaking into the Columbus doors because they're sealed by a magnetic lock. And that magnetic lock can only be deactivated by some sort of code or somebody who knows the code to open that. So we still, after a 2-year-long January 6th committee investigation and unlimited resources by the FBI and the DOJ to investigate January 6th, we still don't know who opened the Columbus doors on the east side of the Capitol. But somebody did. Somebody learned how to open those doors.
You would think it would open. Is it key card activated, or you'd have to, you mentioned punching a code in, so clearly someone with access to punch in this code to open those doors, verifiable by an electronic system, right?
So here's what I believe that we know. And I want to just say believe, because I've seen this video footage and I've read details about it, but I can't sit here before you today and verify that this is absolutely true. But we have seen video of somebody push the doors open. Now after the lock has been demagnetized, deactivated. So the person who opens the doors in the video looks up and is communicating with somebody else right before it happens. So all we can really do, I think, at this point is speculate who was that person communicating with, and did the person who they were communicating with give instructions as to now the door is ready to be opened, or here's how to open the door. I don't know, but there seemed to be some communication happening between these two people, and then the doors are opened.
Right.
And so when I arrived, the doors were already opened, pushed like this. Now, I've talked to a number of J6ers who ended up going inside the Capitol from the east side through those very doors. And what has been reported to me by all of them is that when those doors opened, there was a surge from the crowd. And that if you were standing anywhere in that vicinity, you didn't really have a choice. You were going in because the crowd pushed forward and pushed inside. You know, I've talked to a number of people who said that they were standing at the top of the steps, and that it was just like a wave when those doors opened, that they almost got like
a stampede, like a stampede
of sorts. Yeah.
Right.
So when I got there, the doors were open. I'm filming my video, and there were several hundred people standing on the east side. Now, the majority of them were just standing there shooting a video, like me. Some of them were trying to make their way inside, but there was a large amount of people in a small space, so there was sort of a bottleneck effect, where it's hard to describe the situation accurately, because on the one hand, I wouldn't sit here and say, oh, it was totally calm and people were twiddling their thumbs and whatever. But I can say I would never in a million years classify the atmosphere as a riot, as violent. I mean, it was a bunch of emotionally charged people who, some of them wanted to get inside those open doors, but it was kind of like this, you know, so it was kind of like a, come on, you know, come on kind of thing. And I'm standing there filming this atmosphere, and I stood there for 8 minutes. I never went inside the Capitol on January 6th. So I just want to make that really, really clear. Never entered the building. I would estimate that I didn't get within 35 feet of going inside the building on that day. And after 8 minutes, a man came out of the building. He got on a bullhorn and he said, they've cleared Congress. Everyone left the building. Move out, move out. And at that moment, I immediately turned around, continued filming, and I left. I walked back down the stairs, out to the outer grounds, and then I shot 13 more videos where I basically did street interviews with people. You know, why were you here? What did you see? And some of them were really dark. I mean, there was a moment where several men were very, very agitated and shouting, they shot a woman, they shot a woman, they just shot and killed a woman. And so I interviewed those guys. I actually have really incredible footage from January 6th that I've never released, and I probably never will, because I'm too afraid to get other people in trouble. You know, I don't want to reveal the identities of anybody at this point, but there's some really incredible stuff that I captured in the moment while it was happening. But anyway,
when you say, can I just have you clarify that? And not that we're going to show the video because it's yours, but that these people would get in trouble. Is that based on your experience? You were 35 feet away, and then of course we'll get to what happened to you in just a few moments here. But because they were doing something that could be argued as illegal, or because you see this massive dragnet where they've just rounded up anyone who happened to be nearby the building and kind of threw them all in one bucket?
Right. So definitely emphasis on the latter, but I would say both, because I think your first question was something that could be considered illegal. Well, the spectrum of what we're considering illegal with January 6th is so wide,
right,
that I wouldn't want to put anybody at that risk. I mean, let me give you an example. I didn't enter the Capitol on January 6th. Like I said, I was probably 35 feet away from the doors. The government charged me with a felony of being on restricted grounds. Well, there were hundreds, thousands of people around me. And the political left has dedicated untold resources, and like there are literally hundreds of thousands of people who are hunting down the identities of any of the people in these videos. There are accounts on Twitter like Capital Hunters and Sedition Hunters and stuff, and these
Wow.
accounts have tens of thousands of followers. I mean, they have 50,000, 60,000 followers of people who literally are just active. Like, they try to find footage of someone whose face looks clear, and then they freeze that and they put it out and they share it. Does anyone know who this guy is? Does anyone know? And then they start turning these people over to the FBI.
Crazy.
And I myself got turned over to the FBI by a family member. So that's what I'm talking about. Like, I don't want to put anyone else in that position where their Trump deranged relatives or coworker. I mean, people have been turned over by their coworkers, by their neighbors, by their children, it's nuts. And so I know what I've been through, and I don't want anyone else to have to go through that. And I certainly don't want to be the reason why anybody goes through that.
Right.
But so at this point, I started getting text messages from different cable news shows like the Tucker Carlson Show, Newsmax, and they were asking me, "Are you there? Are you seeing anything?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm right here." And I was like, I shot a bunch of video," and they started asking me, "Can you come on the show tonight? Can you talk about it?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just let me get back to my hotel room and get showered and get dressed." And yes, absolutely. So at that moment, I made the decision to leave, and I left, and I immediately uploaded the first video that I had shot to Twitter, the one where I was approaching the grounds and went up to the stairs and stood there for 8 minutes. I posted that video on Twitter, and I don't remember what I called it, but I probably said something like, "This is what I witnessed today at the Capitol," something. And it's interesting because that was actually kind of my undoing. And the reason why I posted the video is because I thought I was about to go on the cable news and talk about what I had seen. And in my mind, I thought, well, I'll let the video start going viral now, so that in 3 or 4 hours, by the time I do the show, people will already be familiar with the footage that I'm about to talk about. I mean, that was what was in my mind. And you probably have people in the audience who are like, "I have no idea who this person is," and that's fine. But I mean, the truth is, I at that point I had done Fox News. I mean, I was in 2020. I was doing Fox and Friends literally on a weekly basis. I've done Tucker many, many times. So this isn't like an anomaly. I mean, for me, throughout these, I used to go to all the women's marches, Antifa rallies and riots, BLM rallies, MAGA rallies, and do street interviews. This is not an unusual thing. I mean, I have years of history of doing street interviews and going to these events and capturing footage. So I kind of like had a template for how to handle this situation, and that's why I thought that putting the footage out right away was a good idea. And by the time I got back to my hotel room and I was in communication with, I think it was the Tucker Show, they messaged me and they said, "We're not going to have you on tonight. The story is changing." And I thought, what does that mean? And so I turned on my TV in my hotel room, and that's when, for the first time, and by the way, I don't know for sure, but we're probably talking about 5 p.m., something like that.
Right.
For the first time, I started to see footage of what had happened on the west side of the building. For the first time, I started to see the smoke bombs and the flashbangs and the people breaking windows and struggling with police officers. And I was like, what the hell is this?
And you didn't hear any you didn't hear any of the flashbangs from your location, because it's a big building. It's a massive block for anyone who's never been to Washington D.C.
Massive.
It's a big city block. But you didn't hear any of that activity across on the other side of the building from where you were on the east side.
No, and I don't, I'm in this weird position where I feel like I have to be kind of like thoughtful and careful about what I say, because again, everybody takes every single thing that happened on January 6th and lumps it into one thing.
Hmm.
So if you're the guy who talks about like how calm it was and how peaceful it was, people are like, what a maniac and a lunatic. It wasn't, and it's like,
Right.
yeah, but what I saw was,
Right.
I wasn't there for any of that craziness. And no, I didn't, I didn't see smoke in the air. I didn't smell smoke in the air. I didn't, other than the moment where there were those men who were frantic, and I'm talking about literally 3 or 4 men going, they shot a woman, they shot a woman. And by the way, I left shortly after that. But that was really the only moment that where I was like, whoa, like that's crazy. And I couldn't even verify if it was true or not. But um, yeah, so I started to see on the news what had happened on the west side of the building, and I was like, what is this? And I didn't know. I was like, is this happening now? Like, did this start after I left? Or did this happen before I got, what is going on? There were so many questions and it was so bizarre. And my first thought was like, people are not going to understand that the footage that I posted an hour or two ago is not this. Like, I wasn't there for that. So I thought to myself, and for the record, I was never scared that I would get in trouble. That's not where I was coming from. I was more concerned about the PR nightmare of it, that
Right.
people would assume that I was. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to take my video down because I don't want people to think I was there or that I condone this or whatever it even is. I don't know. So I deleted my video. Unfortunately, it had lived on Twitter long enough, an hour or two, that it had already been copied by these people, like I was just telling you about, these people, these left-wing people who basically just exist 24 hours a day to try to cause harm to other people. And so they had already copied the video, and then they began reposting it over and over and over again every day and tagging the FBI and tagging the DOJ and saying Brandon Straka broke into the Capitol, Brandon Straka was a part of this riot, Brandon Straka, blah 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 blah. So this went on for the next couple of weeks, and it wasn't getting better. It was getting worse. At first I just thought, okay, they'll do this for a couple of days and they'll get bored and it'll get out of their system. But that's not what happened. It wasn't getting better. It was getting worse. I mean, they were becoming more and more obsessed with posting this and tagging the FBI. And people were asking me, are you worried? Are you concerned? And I kept saying, no. I was like, I don't really have anything to worry about. Like, I didn't go inside the building. I didn't touch anybody. I didn't do anything. I said, I'm not super comfortable. I don't like that this is happening, particularly since immediately the left wing media and the Democrats thought of this word insurrection, which, to their credit, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Our side, I don't know where you stand, but my side, which is on the right, I'm a conservative and I'm a Republican. We're not good at this stuff. I am, but my side is not good at this stuff. Like, I mean, if the left did exactly the same thing as the right did on January 6th, the right would talk about it for a day or two. They would call it a riot, and then they would move on and start talking about something else. But the left was brilliant. They didn't call it a riot. They called it an insurrection. And they called it an attempt to overthrow the government. And the Donald Trump led this charge to try to overthrow the government. And so I saw how out of hand this was getting immediately. And I also saw how the right was running away from it.
Hmm.
So once again, I'm thinking to myself, okay, the left is going to get complete control of the narrative of this story. The right is going to do nothing to push back and counter, with the truth. And so people were asking me if I was scared, and I said, I'm not scared, but I'm not like super comfortable because this is intense. Like, this is getting really intense. But and it even got to the point after about 2 weeks that I was considering just contacting the FBI myself and just saying, do you guys want to talk to me? Because, I know that you're getting contacted like 100,000 times a day by people trying to turn me in. And I would rather just talk. If you have questions, I'm happy to just answer your
Yeah.
questions because, I was there for 8 minutes outside the building and there wasn't really much to say. But I didn't make that choice. And then So exactly 2.5 weeks after January 6th, on the morning of Monday, January 25th, I woke up at dawn to the sound of boom, 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 boom. And I shot up in my bed, and I knew instantly. Instantly, I was like, "Oh my God!" I just remember thinking, "Oh my God, this really is happening. Like
Wow.
they really did come. Like this is." I just thought it was like nut, but I didn't even have time to process the thought or the feeling, because the way that they were pounding on my door, I knew they were going to break it down if I didn't get there like fast. And so I jumped out of bed, I threw some pants on, and I went like scurrying to my door, and I just said, "Who's out there?" And they said, "FBI, open up." And so I opened the door, and on the other side was a team of FBI agents in tactical gear, vests, helmets, etc. And they came into my apartment, and there was one man who I refer to as the lead agent because he did all the talking. And he said to me, "Do you know why we're here?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You have no idea why we're here." And I said, "Well, I'm assuming you're here in conjunction with January 6th, but I don't know why you're here. Like,
Right.
what do you want with me?"
Right.
And he said, "Well, you're facing multiple felony charges for what you did on January 6th." And I remember I said, "Felonies?" I said, "I didn't even commit any crimes." And he said to me, "Oh, I saw your video. Trust me. Yeah, I saw what you did." And I'm going, and it's the weirdest thing I hope that no one ever finds themselves in a situation like this. Because bear in mind, too, while that conversation's happening, there's a team of agents who are going into my apartment, and they're just rifling through. They're grabbing my computers, my iPads, my phones, my hard drives, my thumb drives, my cameras, my clothing, and putting them into bags and labeling them. And so this is all happening around me while this guy is talking to me. And when he said that to me, I had this moment where like my brain like split, and I was thinking to myself, did I do something? Like, and I was literally, I was like, did I
Right.
like punch a police officer in the face and I don't remember it? Like, did I like, you literally start going like, why would this be happening if I didn't do something? And then you start questioning if you did and you forgot or something.
Right.
And so I had no idea. I mean, and they were serious. This was intent. This was not a joke. And he had already cuffed me. Within 30 seconds, I was in handcuffs. And they told me, you're going to jail. And you're facing multiple felonies. And so they paraded me through my apartment building, took me downstairs, put me in a black car, and they took me to jail. And I ended up spending 2.5 days in jail in 23-hour-a-day lockdown, in a concrete cell with a metal door. And I sat in there for like literally, without you can't roam around, you can't get out. You're basically, I wasn't in solitary confinement because I had a cellmate. So I was trapped in my cell with a 4-time repeat drug offender, for 2.5 days with absolutely no idea what was going on. And all I was sitting there thinking was how for the last 2 weeks, 24 hours a day, all they're talking about on the news is insurrection, treason, sedition, and I've just been told that I'm facing multiple felonies for what I did on January 6th. I literally thought that I was probably charged with treason, insurrection. I kept hearing this word insurrection. So I truly believed that I was never going to see the outside of a jail cell again. I thought,
Jeez.
I'm going to be in prison for the rest of my life because they're going to charge me with treason is punishable by death.
Right.
And by the way, Joe Biden had just become president 5 days before they arrested me, and the Democrats had taken full control of the federal government 5 days before they came and got me. I'm Brandon Straka, the leader of the walkaway movement, encouraging everyone to leave the Democratic Party. And now the Democrats are in full control with their insurrection narrative, and they have me in trapped in a prison cell and telling me I'm facing multiple felony charges for something that they're calling an act of treason, sedition, and insurrection. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm about to be extradited to Washington, D.C. I'm going to be thrown into a D.C. jail. They're not going to let me out. And then I'm going to have some trial in Washington, D.C. where I'm found guilty. And I mean, I was just literally sitting there thinking, I'm never going to see my grandmother again. I'm never going to see my parents again. I'm thinking of all these things I'm never going to do. You know, I'm like,
Right.
wow, I'm never going to have children. I'm never going to I'm never going to see the moon again. I'm never
Right.
going just, you know, so many different things. And really I was in a state of absolute despair. Finally, after a couple of days, a guard came to my cell. He said, "You have an attorney phone call." My team, my employees for Walkaway had found me an attorney while I was in jail. And so I was let out of my cell, had a phone call with this person who I didn't know. And he told me, I've managed to get you a hearing, a virtual hearing with a judge. He said it's going to be later today. And he said there's about a 99% chance he's going to authorize your release because the government is actually not asking for you to be detained. They're okay with letting you go. And I was like, great. Okay, good. So I went to my virtual hearing. I sat there before a judge. I was wearing an orange jumpsuit. I hadn't showered in days. You know, I felt like a total scumbag. And I listened to this judge say, this is the case of the United States of America versus Brandon Straka. And he starts explaining the details of what I'm being accused of. And then the federal prosecutor for the government starts speaking. And he's very jovial. He's, you know, very lighthearted, this prosecutor. And he says, Your Honor, the government has no problem with you releasing Mr. Straka. We know that Mr. Straka didn't go inside the Capitol. We know that Mr. Straka didn't engage in any violence or vandalism or theft or destruction. So we're comfortable with you releasing Mr. Straka pending his trial. And I remember thinking to myself, if you know all of this, why did you just send an FBI team of agents in tactical gear to my apartment to put me in handcuffs and drag me off to jail, strip my apartment? Like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
Nonetheless, my release was ordered, and after midnight that night, I was let out and I was let go. And that's when I finally began to understand what I was being charged with and what was happening. So I met with my attorney the next morning in person, and he explained to me, they're charging you with a felony of occupying restricted grounds. He was like, the area where you were standing, you weren't allowed to be there. There were, you know, tens of thousands of people around me holding signs, singing, chanting, etc. But he said that area was restricted, and so you were charged with a felony. Now, this is very interesting because the majority of people, like, I still have not heard of or met another person who was charged with a felony of being in a restricted area. Even all the people who went inside the Capitol were charged with misdemeanors of occupying a restricted building. I actually know a girl who went into the Capitol through a broken window. She crawled into the building through a broken window and was charged with a misdemeanor of occupying a restricted building. I was charged with a felony of being on restricted grounds outside of the building. He said they're also charging you with a felony that they're calling impeding a police officer in the line of duty. And I was like, what is that? And he said to me, well, in your video, there's a moment, it lasts about 6 seconds, where one Capitol police officer comes to those two large open doors. He comes to the door frame of those open doors. And when he gets there, somebody grabs his plastic shield out of his hand. And when that happens, you can hear several people in the crowd, voices saying, take the shield, and take it. And he said, well, the FBI says that that's you. The voice, one of these voices is you. And so they're charging you with another felony for saying these words. And
did you say those words?
So I have taken a plea deal, and in the plea deal, it states that I said those words, and that is, I signed that plea deal. I took that plea deal. So that's where that stands. Um, they also charged me with a misdemeanor of disorderly conduct with an intent to disrupt a hearing before Congress. And then my attorney told me that's what you're currently charged with. He said, I already spoke with the prosecutor, and the prosecutor told me that so far they haven't charged you with an additional felony of obstruction of Congress. He said that that charge carries a 20-year prison sentence. They're charging some people with this obstruction of Congress, but so far they haven't chosen to charge you with it, and that they would be open to discussing a plea deal. I interpreted that to mean if I don't take the plea deal, I'll be then facing the additional felony of obstruction of Congress of 20 years. And when my attorney and I weighed the options that were available to me, which were essentially fight the charges, go before a DC judge and a DC jury in one of the most liberal, Trump-hating areas of the entire country, like 92% of Washington, D.C. is Democrat. They hate Donald Trump. They hate Donald Trump supporters. And none of the judges in these cases are releasing jurisdiction anywhere else in the country. So nobody has the option to be tried anywhere else where they might actually stand a chance. Needless to say, I made the decision that I would take the misdemeanor plea deal that was being offered to me. And so that's what I did. The felony charges were dropped. I took the misdemeanor plea deal. And that may sound like a happy ending to some people, but it's been anything but. And it bears mentioning that there are a lot of sealed documents in my case that were just recently unsealed this week after 2 years after the fact. And one of these documents actually has a transcript of the final hearing of my case before my sentencing, months after I took a plea deal, in which the prosecutor said, we actually never had any reason to charge him with any felonies. After we spoke to him and reviewed the case, we felt that we didn't have any justification to charge him with any felonies in this case. So, yeah.
So wait, that stuff is kept from you, and then you make your plea deal based on the potential that this could get really ugly, and you're going to just, I'll take these misdemeanors, I'll get my hand slapped for something I didn't do, but otherwise I risk then going to trial where who knows what kind of jury I might face in this very, very liberal city with
right.
In this situation. I could wind up in prison for 20 years on something I didn't do, or just get my hand slapped for something I didn't do. So you're weighing these options, and I know so many other people probably had to do the same thing. But then you come to find out that they never had any intention. They never had any intention of this, and you didn't get access to these documents.
No, and well, this was something that was said verbally in court. I'm quoting from the transcript of what the prosecution said at the final hearing before my sentencing, and when that hearing was over, my attorney just looked at me and said, "Oh my God," he was just like, "I what?" It was shocking. I mean, it was like absolutely, totally shocking. But I want you to know too that for the people who there's a handful of people who have decided to go to trial, and I mean, it's just been an absolute sham and a nightmare for these people, because I've actually spoken to a number of the attorneys who are representing people who have gone to trial in DC. And in these cases, when they're doing the jury selection, the government, when they're interviewing potential jurors, is asking them questions like, have you ever attended, how do you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement? And have you ever attended any of the Women's March events? I mean, they're literally kind of sussing out who are the most liberal people that we can find. And they're pushing to stack the jury with the most liberal people and asking them questions like, do you think the Proud Boys are white supremacists? Do you think the Oath Keepers are a racist organization? And these attorneys are saying that every person is saying yes, yes, and these are the people that they're pushing to put on these juries. So to be clear, I don't regret, people hear, my story and they're like, well, do you regret taking a plea deal? No, no, no. I mean, this sucks. I mean, it absolutely sucks. But you have to understand, this is not like just about any other situation. Most of us are conditioned to view most situations in life as what is the winning option? What is the losing option? How do I win? How do I lose? This was never the question for me. My question was never how do I win and how do I lose? It was how do I lose the least?
Right.
This is a lose. I can't win. There is no winning. You're going up against the federal government. They have unlimited resources. They have unlimited money. They have unlimited manpower. I can afford one attorney. I can afford that. They have hundreds of attorneys dedicated to this. They have thousands of aides who can spend countless hours going through documents, going through video footage, going through my record, interviewing witnesses. This is what you're up against. And then they get the power to have their jurisdiction, to have their jury pool. You're screwed. So I don't regret taking a plea deal. I regret that I was ever put in this situation. That's what I regret.
Sure.
But if I had to do it over again, I would make exactly the same choice, because that was the only path forward for me. And God bless those people. I know a couple of people who have chosen to go to trial, and they've chosen to go to trial knowing they're going to lose. They said, I know I'm going to lose, and I know I'm going to prison. But they said, a lot of them are extremely faith-based people. And what they say is that, my God and my faith will not allow me to bear false witness. I won't do it. So they said, I'm going to go and I'm going to tell the truth. And I know I'm going to prison. And I just, God bless those people. But I wanted to live my life. I wanted to do my work. I wanted to, try to pick up the pieces of what's left and try to rebuild something for myself. And, I'm not in my 20s anymore. I don't want to go to prison and get out and be in my 50s and try to figure out what do I do now?
Right.
So it is what it is. But the last thing I'll say, I know I've talked a lot, and you probably have questions. But the last thing I'll say is that, people listening to this might be like, what are you bitching about? Shut up. It's a misdemeanor. And that's how I feel too. Yeah, it's a misdemeanor, I can live with that, right? Except for the fact that January 6th is its own beast and its own monster that is unlike anything that has ever been tried or adjudicated in American history. So even the lowest level misdemeanors, and mine is, I don't even have a class A misdemeanor. I have a class B misdemeanor, which means it's an even lower level. It's what the court refers to as a petty offense. My attorney said it's a class B misdemeanor is like playing your music too loud on a Friday night. It's that type of misdemeanor. But it's being treated, even though it's a class B misdemeanor, it's being treated as an act of terrorism. It's being treated as an act of sedition against your country. So because of my class B misdemeanor conviction, polite society has ostracized me and pretty much every other person who has been ensnared into this trap of January 6th. I mean, I have literally been permanently banned by PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, Patreon, MailChimp, Constant Contact, Instagram, donor portals, email services, software companies. I was placed on a terrorism watch list, just like every other J6er, through the entire. Now they have now finally released that, which is amazing, because I thought that this was going to be a lifelong condemnation. But for over a year, every time I went to the airport, and I travel frequently for my work, I had to go through hours of screening with this designation that they call Quad S, SSSS, where you have 4 large red S's on your boarding pass. And I used to have TSA pre-check too, but I got a letter in the mail saying that my TSA pre-check status was revoked because the government no longer considers me a low-risk traveler, and on my Class B misdemeanor. And then they gave me this Quad S designation, which TSA explained to me It's the highest level terrorism list you can be on and still be allowed to fly. He said anything more and you would literally be on the no-fly list. And so you have to go through hours of screening. And then after you get through the hours of screening, they have a team of TSA agents follow you around the airport everywhere you go. And while you're waiting for your flight, they station themselves around you. And sometimes they bring dogs. And I've taken pictures. If anyone's like, you're lying, this is stupid, shut up. Every time I traveled, I would take pictures. So I've got dozens of pictures in dozens of airports of me sitting there with an agent with a dog and an agent with a dog and 3 agents here and 4 agents behind me. It's nuts. In fact, when I was in LAX, I was at the Los Angeles airport, and the head of TSA, because you don't even get a deal with normal TSA agents. They have to bring like the top supervisors to deal with you when you're going through they closed down a security lane just for you. And they have the head of the TSA at that airport come and supervise your screening, and they have to sign off like, okay, this person's safe to fly. Jesus. And when I was at LAX, it was this black woman, which I'm not going to lie, I was concerned because a lot of black people believe that Trump supporters are racists and bigots, and and I'm very honest with people. She said to me, she was like, "Why are you on this list?" And I was like, "I went to the Capitol on January 6th. I was like, I was arrested." And she started laughing, and I was like, "What?" And she goes, "Every day," she was like, "we transport murderers from one prison to another prison." She was like, "We never do this." She was like, I have literally never had to do this before. And she was like, and every single day, she was like, we have criminals, like murderers, coming through our security to go from one prison to another prison. She was like, I have never had to do this before. And she was just laughing. She was like, oh my God, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Wow. It's clear to me looking, and I'm sure our audience as well. And I don't think, as you said, I don't think our audience, when you said, oh, what is he bitching about a misdemeanor? I don't think anybody in our audience would say that, because to have your life upended, FBI agents coming to your house, thrown in prison, like, yes, you now have this misdemeanor, but nevertheless, your life was upended as a result of this. And no government, this absolute government overreach in my, to my mind. And it seems like it was pure retaliation, right? We're going to make your life as difficult as possible. We're going to show you who's boss. You've been leading this walk away movement. We're going to make your life a living hell. You got a misdemeanor, but we're going to make sure that every time you travel, you know who's boss. You know who's 100%. In charge. Is that right? Is that odd, or is that the right way to look at this?
No, you're right on the money. And well, yes, it's that, and I also think it's an effort to break you down so that you don't even want to travel, or you don't even want to continue to do your work, which almost worked, by the way, because there were, in fact, I still feel it to this day, because I travel a lot. And for people who are familiar with my work and everything that I did from 2018 through to January 2021, I with all modesty, say that I believe that I'm the hardest working activist in the conservative movement. I mean, I was doing a college campus tour. I was doing walkaway rallies and events. We were doing these town halls and debate events, shooting educational videos. And in between, then I would travel to other people's rallies and events and do street interviews. I was always on the go for 2.5 straight years. There was just never sitting still. I was always flying to this city and flying to this city, and I loved it. I love that pace. I love that energy.
You're in a hotel right now.
I'm in a hotel right now, and and tomorrow I'm flying to Texas to do another event, and then 3 days after that I'm flying to California to do another event. So yeah, that's how I like to live. That's how I like to roll. But I have to be honest, like it has taken a toll on me, because I do now go like, how badly do I want to do this? Right. And is it worth it? And because even now like I said, they've lifted that terrorism list designation. But I did, and we haven't even gotten into my sentencing yet, but one of the conditions of my sentencing was that I was placed on 3 years of federal probation. So every time I leave the state that I live in, I have to get permission from the court to travel. So, and it's not like a, hey, can I travel? Sure. It's you have to fill out a form and you have to tell them where you're going, when you're leaving, when you're coming back, what hotel you're staying at, what your flight number is. If you're renting a car, you have to give them all the details of the rental car. You have to give them, and it's district by district. It's not even state by state. So, for example, California has at least 4 or 5 districts. It's a huge state. So I took a trip several months ago where I flew to San Diego and I got permission to go to San Diego. But while I was there, one of my big supporters and donors and a good friend of mine who lives in Los Angeles, she lives in Beverly Hills, I contacted her and I said, hey, I'm in San Diego. She said, oh, can you drive up and let's have dinner on Friday night? Because I think it's hour and a half drive from San Diego to Los Angeles, real quick, no big deal. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'll come see you. Just to be sure, I called my probation officer and I said, hey, it's not a problem for me to drive to Los Angeles to see one of my donors on Friday night, is it? She said, that's actually a different district. And she said, I don't have time to get your approval. Oh. So I couldn't go. I couldn't drive from San Diego to Los Angeles because there wasn't enough time for me to get permission to make that hour and a half drive.
And your misdemeanor, Class B misdemeanor, as you said, is like playing music too loud. It's that level. It's actually less than driving with an expired license, right? It's actually a lower offense than driving with or it actually might be the same, right? I don't know. But anyway, I don't have any experience with it, but I'm saying it's very minimal. And even people that drive with an expired license and get their hands slapped, they don't have this level of scrutiny. So your level of scrutiny is beyond anything I've ever heard of before for this designation. Have you heard anybody else with this same level of scrutiny for that same misdemeanor offense?
Other J6ers, every person with January 6th, but no, not any other case or any other crime I've ever heard of in the history of American law. I've never heard of this. And we haven't even talked. Let's talk about my sentencing.
Yeah.
So, the government, another tactic that the government uses to inflict maximum pain on people is the constant delaying of your case. And you have to bear in mind too, in addition to what I already said about like the social media hunter, hundreds of thousands of people hunting you on social media, and they obsessively follow your case, and they're obsessively reporting about every detail of your case just to keep people remembering that you're an insurrectionist and you're a traitor and you're a seditionist and you're all of these different things. The media is in on this too. The media loves it. This is like pay dirt for them. The media loves to be able to come out with another round of stories calling you an insurrectionist and reminding people this is somebody that needs to be removed from polite society. This is somebody who is not allowed to exist in civilized society anymore. And so the government will say, okay, we're going to have your plea hearing on July 1st. And, this is February. So you wait patiently to get to July 1st so that you can just get this over with and just move past it and move on with your life. And then literally every single time, they wait until the last hour on the last day. So you will hear from them on June 30th at 4:30 p.m. to say, we're canceling your hearing tomorrow. We need another 3 months. We're rescheduling for October 1st. Jeez. And when they do that, then another round of media happens. Like, I'm talking international headlines. Case of Brandon Straka, the insurrectionist who stood outside the Capitol, blah, 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 has been delayed another 3 months. And then, so it's a whole nother round of horrible media that just dominates. You Google your name and it's just 5 more pages of crap calling you an insurrectionist. So then you wait for 3 months and you wait and you just want to get over with. You want to get it over with. And then they do it again. In my case, they did this 5 times. 5 times they delayed my case for an additional 30 days. So it ended up taking over a year before we finally got to my sentencing. And when we finally got to my sentencing, I had already spent 2.5 days in jail from when the FBI came and rounded me up and took me away. So my attorney was saying, this should be a case of time served. It's a Class B misdemeanor. He doesn't have a criminal record. You know, he didn't go inside the building. He spent 2.5 days in jail. He's been placed on this terrorism list. He's been destroyed in the media. He's been banned by all these different companies that he uses. Like, he can't send and receive money. He can't send and receive emails. He can't, it's a Class B misdemeanor. That's enough. It's enough. But the court disagreed that was enough. And so in addition to all of that, I was then sentenced to 3 months of house arrest with an ankle tracking monitor on my ankle. I wasn't allowed to leave my apartment. And the government was able to track me for 3 months in case and I mean, we're talking about, you can't even leave your apartment. Like, I couldn't even go into the lobby of my building to get my mail. I wasn't allowed to leave the door of my apartment. And, I don't live in like a huge apartment. So, anyway, I was confined to my apartment for 3 months, 3 years of federal probation, 60 hours of community service. The government didn't even ask for a fine in my case, but the court imposed the maximum fine of $5,000. I was ordered to pay $500 restitution to the Capitol, although it was acknowledged that I didn't commit any violence or destruction to the Capitol, but I had to pay restitution. And court ordered mental health evaluation and mental health services. So I had to go get a psychological evaluation, and then I was required to complete courses of mental health counseling and therapy because I voted for Donald Trump, so obviously I'm insane. So I completed every aspect of my sentencing I think within a month, but certainly within like 6. I did all my community service. I paid all my fines, my restitution. I did my 3 months of house arrest. And so the only thing that remains at this point is the remainder of my probation, which only time will take care of. There's nothing I can do about that. And at this point, that's 2 more years. I've completed 1 year of that. And during the course of this next 2 years, I'm not allowed to leave the state without permission from the court. And I kind of just told you what that process is like. If God forbid I violate probation, or it's suspected that I violate probation, I'll be going once again before the Washington, D.C. court to deal with my violation. And this is the last thing I'll say. The prosecution actually requested, when I was sentenced to my 3 years of probation, the prosecution requested the right during those 3 years of probation. They asked for the right to surveil my computer, my phone, my email, my social media accounts, and my bank accounts. They said, we just to make sure that we get a heads up if he's thinking about committing another crime, we want to be able to surveil his bank accounts, his email accounts, his social media accounts. And the judge actually did not grant them that. That was like my big win, that the judge, but they wanted, on my Class B misdemeanor, the government wanted the right to surveil for 3 years, my bank accounts, email accounts, social media, etc.
Well, the judge probably just looked right over at them and said, let's be honest, guys, you guys are already doing this anyway.
You're already doing it.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, NSA, and we know that is already happening, of course, whether it's the CIA or the NSA or whatever. So we've already got that. We don't need that written down. I mean, it sounds like something out of it sounds like something you'd read about out of North Korea. It sounds like fiction, like that this could actually happen in the United States of America. Has this strengthened your resolve to get out there and spread the message of what this government is doing, or has it deflated you to the point where maybe I want to do something else in my life because going up against this monolith is just it's crushing, it's soul crushing?
Well, it absolutely has not deterred me from wanting to do the work that I do and spread the activism that I do and spread the message, encouraging people to walk away, to have, my whole mission is to inspire people to have an awakening of, like I had. I mean, I had a very organic awakening back in 2017. I was a diehard Democrat. I mean, 5 years ago, these were my people. The people who now are crucifying me, who are shattering and destroying my life, those were my people 5 years ago. I used to love Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. I voted for Barack Obama twice, which means I also voted for Joe Biden twice. I
Wow.
voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. These were my folks. But in 2017, after Donald Trump got elected, uh, I was miserable about his election, and it was crazy, the way that the media that I loved and trusted, like CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, etc. I mean, just the rhetoric was getting so intense and so crazy, and I was just in a constant state of anxiety. So I kind of went on this quest to understand, how did he get elected? Because, like, my position at that time was like, Republicans are horrible people, but I was like, they're not. I didn't think they were that horrible. I was just like, like, that you're literally going to, like, put Hitler into office and, destroy our country. And so I kind of went on this quest to understand how this happened. And it's a long and kind of detailed story, but ultimately, obviously, it resulted in the realization for me that the media that I had been trusting was lying to me, that the political figures that I had loved, like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, were frauds, liars, and deceivers, and that I was being manipulated. And particularly, I'm a gay man, and they're manipulating minorities. They're manipulating Black people, brown people, LGBT people, immigrants, women. We're being lied to more than anyone, and deceived and manipulated. And so when I had that awakening, I wanted to share that with other people. And my reason, honestly, I believe, was very altruistic. I was scared to death when Donald Trump got elected. I was terrified. And then when I realized I didn't need to be terrified, he wasn't a bad guy with bad intentions, and his followers are not bad people with bad intentions. The people with the bad intentions are the liars in the media and all of those people who are trying to manipulate me through fear. And the good news is that you don't have to be afraid. This is all a lie. That's all I wanted to do, was kind of share that information with other people, particularly, Black and brown and LGBT people, and say, like, look, you don't have to be a Republican if you don't want to be. You don't have to vote for Donald Trump. You don't have to. Just stop being afraid.
Right.
Just stop being controlled. That's all I wanted to do with Walkaway. And so I haven't lost my passion through anything that they've put me through to continue to do that work. Like, I absolutely still want to do that. However, you asked, do I feel deflated? Yeah, I feel really deflated. And the reason why is not so much because of what the left did, or I'm not surprised that the government's capable of doing this. I'm not surprised that liberals and leftists are capable of doing this. I don't believe that they have any boundaries when it comes to punishing what they perceive to be this egregious threat to our country. What I'm deflated about was the reaction from the right. That has been crushing to me. 2 years ago, if you had told me you're about to be arrested, you're about to be thrown in jail, you're about to be dragged through hell, I would have been like, okay, buckle up, get ready. But I know that my side has my back. I know that the contacts that I've made over the last few years in Congress, all the work that I have done to support Donald Trump and the Trump administration, and that I have hundreds of thousands, millions of followers who love me, who support me, who are behind me. No one's going to let me fall. Yeah, I'm going to get arrested. Yeah, I'm going to go to jail. But when I get out, there's going to be this outcry of support. And, people are going to say, I stand with Brandon Straka, and people are going to get behind me. But it was silence. It was stunning silence when I got out of jail.
Wow.
And to this day, there's literally not one single person, Republican in Congress, who's ever said my name out loud on Twitter, on Facebook. Not one Republican in Congress has ever said the name Brandon Straka in the last 2 years. Nobody from the Trump administration has ever said my name. Or really, I mean, other than in the most generic possible terms, spoken about the January 6th defendants. And I understand that it can be a little scary because we've seen with our own eyes. people breaking windows and fighting with police officers. I don't support that. I don't condone that. I'm not okay with that. But you've got hundreds of people whose lives are being crushed and torn apart based off of accusations and speculation. And worst case scenario, they walked in the building. And we know that in some, perhaps the majority, I don't know, of these cases, there were police officers going like this.
Right.
When these people walked inside, you're too scared to speak up for these people and say, yeah, like if you punched a police officer or if you broke through a window, you're going to have to pay a price for doing that. But, you arrived there, the doors were open, someone's waving like this, and you walked in, you're too scared to stand up and say, that person's probably not a terrorist. That person's probably not a threat to the United States government.
Right.
Or in my case, standing outside shooting a video. Like how much courage does it take to say my name and be like, what the government is doing to Brandon Straka is wrong. This can't be allowed to happen. That is what has been deflating to me, is that absolute cowardice and silence from people on the right who could have made a difference, who could have possibly had the potential of making this thing take a different turn. I don't think that anyone had the power to get my charges dropped or prevent me from having to go through this. But I can tell you that I have had countless sleepless nights feeling crushed and alone. And that it didn't have to be like that. It didn't have to be like that.
So 2 more years then of this, 2 more years of having to watch and make sure that you're not violating probation. And for the people that aren't in your situation, who are still facing, I mean, we're hearing still that there's potentially 1,000 additional arrests to be made, that this is not over, this is not stopping. And then have you heard, I mean, we hear from maybe Matt Gaetz, Congressman Matt Gaetz, maybe that's one voice I've heard where they want to try to stop this. Are you encouraged by any of this latest rhetoric from the new Congress coming in, the new House of Representatives, that this will stop? Or is this, in your mind, from the people you've interviewed, I know you've spoken to so many January 6ers, that they're concerned, they're facing these trials, this is going to continue?
I don't think that anything has convinced me that this isn't going to continue, but I am at the same time still encouraged. I'm encouraged at least by the conversations and the language and some of the actions that are beginning to be taken to indicate that perhaps at the very least there might be another side to this that begins being revealed. Or because honestly, that's all I've ever wanted in this whole thing is nuance. I just want the exposure of nuance, because what I haven't had is on any large scale beyond what I've been able to do myself. And I have a decent reach. I'm able to reach some people on Twitter and Facebook, and there are a few people in the media who are honestly gods and saviors to me. People like Tucker Carlson, people like Mark Levin, people like Dinesh D'Souza, Eric Metaxas, Sebastian Gorka. I'm going to be leaving people out, but there's a handful of people who've stood up for me and given me a platform to be able to speak when probably the majority of the media contact, Greg Kelly is one of them, probably the majority of my media contacts before January 6th stopped answering my texts, my phone calls, my emails. We're not providing a platform. So I've got like not only the might of the government, but the might of the liberal media pushing on me, creating their narratives and their lies and their exaggerations and everything else, with almost no ability beyond my own platform to present a counter narrative to what they're saying. And all I've really wanted through this whole thing is to establish some nuance in these cases, to say, I wasn't there for what the worst things that you guys are so upset about. And by the way, I'm upset about too. If it was Trump supporters, and I'm sure some of them were, I don't know. I mean, now we wonder, were there infiltrators? Were there agitators? Who sent these people? What was it? it's very hard for me to contemplate that the same Trump supporters that I attended dozens of rallies and events with for years, who, like I said, it's difficult to even get them to stop, to come out of their garden on a Saturday, or from playing with their grandkids on a Saturday to show up for an event. Now suddenly, they're bringing poles and smashing through windows, when that's exactly the kind of behavior we saw from Antifa for years. Never have seen conservatives behave like this. Nonetheless, I'm expected to be lumped in with those people just because I got charged. And all I want is, in my opinion, what should have happened is if the DOJ decided to charge and criminalize everybody for what happened on that day, every side of that building should have been dealt with as like its own event. The west side of the building should have been its own set of charges and its own event. The east side of the building should have been its own set of charges and its own event. And that should have been clearly established by the government. The government, if they were truly interested in being fair and truly interested in just seeking justice or righting some sort of wrong, they really should have gone out of their way to say, on the east side of the building, these are the things that didn't happen. These people didn't, do this, this, and this. However, it was a restricted area. They weren't allowed to be there. They weren't allowed to go inside the Capitol. Yes, the doors were open. Yes, they walked in peacefully, or mostly peacefully, whatever, but it's still trespassing. Fine. You want to charge people with misdemeanors for trespassing? You want to charge people with misdemeanors for standing in a restricted area? Fine. But there should have been some obligation to say, these people did not do here what these people did over here. But instead, they actually love that there's this blurred line and this narrative of an insurrection that surrounded the entire building, which didn't happen. So what I'm optimistic about, or that I'm encouraged by or hopeful for, is that this new Congress will hopefully hold some hearings, hopefully do some investigations, and hopefully establish a little bit of nuance and context so that some people can understand that just because you were arrested and charged doesn't mean that you were a part of some sort of terroristic attempt to overthrow the government, but perhaps you were standing somewhere where you weren't allowed to be standing. The part that discourages me is that, as motivated as a lot of these Republicans in Congress are telling people that they are, they don't really know anything yet. And I hope that changes. I mean, I've spoken to a handful of people in Congress, and they're very like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and we're going to get to the bottom of this. And I keep saying, yeah, but you're not talking to any of the J6ers, including me. Like, you can't go full steam ahead and charge forward until you have the information. And I know for a fact that as of today, none of them have the information.
Wow.
Because they haven't interviewed any J6ers. They don't know anything about what our FBI raids were like, what the process of considering whether or not we would take plea deals was like, how the government treated us during this process. They don't know any of that because they haven't talked to any of us.
Wow.
So that concerns me a lot.
I would love any members of Congress to come on this show and sit down with us and talk about it. I'd invite you back to be here on the show with them to be able to share this, and hopefully they'll watch this.
That would be great.
There's so much in this, so much nuance in this, and that's why I wanted to have you on here, is to be able to explain this and to give you the floor really to provide this nuance, because so many people just got a CNN version of what happened that day on the west side of the building, right. And so many people don't understand that it's not a monolithic event, that there were so many subtleties to it. There's so many pieces of nuance, right, to what happened that day, that I'm thankful that you've been able to share at least some of that, at least one person's view of that on that day, as horrible as it was. And of course, I think it's just absolutely horrible what happened to you. So I'll say that. And where can people follow your work? And I'd love to be able to have updates if we're able to continue this conversation with you at some point, maybe in the next few months.
Yeah, I love that.
As Congress extends this, and hopefully we can start to see some more movement from Congress, because I think it's absolutely draconian what's unfolded. But where can people follow what you're currently doing, your speeches and your work to get this message out?
Thank you for that. And I first of all, thank you for having me on here and having this conversation. It means a lot to me. And I know you guys have a huge reach. You do really amazing work. I've been hearing so many people in my circle talk about you guys recently, and oh, these guys on YouTube. So you're doing
Thank you.
amazing work, and I thank you so much for this opportunity. Um, I am kind of in the process right now of rebuilding a lot. A lot was taken away from me. So if people, I would appreciate it greatly if people subscribed to my YouTube channel. I have mine. It's my name at Brandon Straka. There's also the Walkaway Campaign YouTube channel, because we're just about to relaunch the Walkaway movement next month. I have something really, really, really big that I'm going to be announcing in the next couple of weeks in terms of this relaunch. So I want people to be paying attention. But I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, and then I'm also on Getter and Truth Social. If people, I'm really frustrated with Twitter. I got to be honest with you. I think that everyone celebrated way too fast the Elon Musk takeover of Twitter, because around the time of January 6th, it might have been just before or just after, Twitter placed a search ban on my account and deboosting. So, there's those platforms you can go to see if you're ghost banned or shadow banned or search banned. I've had a search ban on my account now for going on 3 years. And that hasn't changed, even under Elon Musk. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of conversation about if or when that's ever going to change. There's a lot of us. I'm certainly not the only one. Many, many, many conservatives. My reach is like 10% of what it used to be pre-January 6th. So anyway, the point is that if people are on Twitter, they might go and type in my name and be like, oh, he doesn't have an account. I do. You just have to work extra hard to find it. So it's just my name, at Brandon Straka, and my last name is spelled Straka. Please give me a follow on Twitter. I'm very active on there. It's very hard to find me. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, and Truth Social. So yeah, please give me a follow and just keep paying attention, because big news coming about the relaunch of Walkaway, and I really want people to get behind it.
Well, it's important work what you're doing, and unfortunately, the fact that you had to go through all of this hell, doesn't make it easier, but it certainly solidifies the fact that we need a change in this country, and what the work that you're doing absolutely amplifies that. So, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for sharing your story, taking time out on this on a travel day for you in one of your many locations and destinations, and sharing your story with us. I hope everyone watching this, you got something from it and can share this with a a loved one, a family member who has a very narrow, myopic view of what happened on that day. It's eye-opening, and everyone should be able to sit down with an open mind and watch this interview. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us here on Redacted.
May I say one more thing?
Please.
Just very quickly, based off of what you just said a moment ago about needing a change in this country. I want people to know when they're listening to this story, even if you're somebody who maybe politically is far on the other side of the spectrum, and you don't like me, you don't like what I believe in, you don't like who I vote for, please know that what I've gone through and what other people are going through, and my advocacy on this topic when I speak about this, I don't want what happened to me to happen to anybody. I don't want it to happen to Democrats. I don't want it to happen to socialists. I don't want it to happen to communists. I don't want it to happen to far leftists. I don't want it to happen to progressives. What happened to me is a terrifying thing that could happen to any American of any political background if we start allowing things like this to be normalized. And so this isn't a left versus right issue. This is a power versus the individual issue. And that affects all of us. So please know that no matter how much we may disagree politically, I don't want this to happen to anybody in this country ever again.
Hallelujah. Yeah, I think, and that's, what our show is all about, holding powerful people to account. And it's really not about party. It's not about politics. It's about power over what they deem as the proletariat. So well said. Well said. Well, thank you, Brandon, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for subscribing and being a part of our community and being a part of these conversations. We'll see you next time.